My name is Christina Walker, and until last year, I thought I had a perfect life. I lived in Dallas, Texas, with my husband James Walker and our daughter Nina. James was a senior architect for a big construction firm downtown, and I ran a small design studio from home. We weren't rich, but we had built a life together from scratch, and I believed in us. That belief shattered on the day of Nina's high school graduation. The morning had been beautiful, sunlight streaming through the blinds, coffee brewing, and James pacing the kitchen, looking more nervous than our daughter. Nina had spent weeks practicing her speech as class valedictorian, and I couldn't have been prouder. She was the kind of young woman who made you believe in goodness, thoughtful, kind, and stronger than she realized. The ceremony was held at the Dallas Convention Hall, packed with proud parents and families. James held my hand during Nina's speech, smiling just enough to look convincing. When she mentioned us, my parents, who taught me that love and perseverance build everything worth having, I felt tears sting my eyes. For a moment, it felt like everything we had worked for meant something. After the event, we gathered with family and friends at a restaurant near Uptown. I'd reserved a private section, decorated it with balloons and photos of Nina from childhood to graduation day. Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating her future. Then James stood up to make a toast. He cleared his throat and smiled awkwardly. "I want to say something important tonight," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "Nina, we're proud of you. You've grown into an incredible woman and, well, since this is a day of new beginnings, I think it's time I start one of my own." The room went silent. I frowned, confused, glancing at him. "James, what do you mean?" He took a deep breath. "I've decided to start a new life. Without you, Christina." The laughter around the table faded instantly. Every head turned. My heart stopped. He looked at me, calm, almost relieved. "I've met someone else. I didn't want to hide it anymore." And then I saw her. Melissa, sitting quietly at a nearby table with two of our old friends. She didn't even look ashamed. Just smug, like she'd been waiting for this moment. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. My hands went cold, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled, a smile that surprised even me, and said, "Well, congratulations on your honesty, James. You could have heard a pin drop." Nina was frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. My friends avoided my gaze. Even the servers stood awkwardly, unsure what to do next. I calmly set down my glass, took a slow breath, and said, "Enjoy your evening, everyone." Then I turned to Nina. "Sweetheart, let's go." We left that restaurant without looking back. The drive home was quiet, except for the hum of the car and the sound of Nina's quiet sobs. "Mom," she whispered, "why would he do that?" I didn't have an answer. All I said was, "Sometimes people show who they really are when you least expect it." That night, after Nina went to bed, I sat in the living room surrounded by old family photos, birthdays, vacations, anniversaries. Every picture felt like a lie now. My phone buzzed again and again, messages from friends, relatives, even James. I didn't respond to any of them. At 2 a.m., I walked to the mirror in our bedroom and looked at myself. The woman staring back looked tired, hurt, and smaller than she remembered. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else, a flicker of something sharper. Resolve. James thought he ended something that night. He didn't realize he had just started something much bigger. He left me humiliated in front of everyone we knew. But I wasn't going to stay broken. He had taken my peace. Now I'd take back my power. The morning after James's announcement felt like waking up inside someone else's life. His side of the bed was empty, cold, already stripped of his things. Half the closet was bare. The drawers that once smelled faintly of his cologne now held nothing but silence. He didn't even have the decency to face me again. Instead, he left a message on my phone. His voice was steady, too calm. "Christina, I didn't want to hurt you. I just can't keep pretending. I'll come by later this week to collect the rest of my stuff. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder than it has to be?" He had humiliated me in front of everyone I loved, and now he wanted peace. I deleted the message without replying. That morning, I brewed a pot of coffee I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table staring at the sunlight spilling across the floor. The house felt too quiet, too still. Every corner whispered his absence. Nina came downstairs around 10, still in her pajamas. Her eyes were red and swollen, her voice small. "Did he really mean it, Mom?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart." He meant every word. She bit her lip, holding back tears. How could he do that? On my day, I had no answer. So I just pulled her close. For a long time, neither of us spoke. In the days that followed, the news spread fast. Dallas has a way of making private pain public. My phone buzzed with sympathy texts and awkward apologies from people who had been at the dinner. Some offered help. Others just wanted the story. I ignored most of them. What no one saw were the nights. The silence that crept in after midnight, when my mind replayed every conversation with James. Every late night he said he was working late. Every text he left unanswered. Every subtle change I'd ignored. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. One afternoon, while cleaning out his office, I found a half-open drawer filled with receipts and business cards. Hotel bookings in Plano, restaurant checks signed with his name, and a handwritten note. "You looked beautiful last night. Can't wait to see you again." Melissa's handwriting. My hand trembled as I held that note, not because I was surprised, but because the truth had finally stopped hiding. He hadn't just betrayed me. He'd planned his new life while pretending ours still mattered. That night, I sat on the back porch, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The pain in my chest wasn't just heartbreak anymore. It was something deeper, a quiet determination taking root. Nina joined me, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "Mom," she said softly, "are you okay?" I smiled faintly. "Not yet. But I will be." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You don't have to be strong all the time." "I know," I whispered. "But I have to be strong enough." The following weeks blurred together. Divorce paperwork, bank meetings, lawyers, and the endless logistics of starting over. James moved into a new apartment downtown with Melissa, and just like that, 15 years of marriage were reduced to signatures and settlements. But while he was settling into his new life, I was rebuilding mine from the ashes. I started taking new clients again for my design business. At first, it was slow, a few home remodels, small office contracts. But I worked with a quiet fire I hadn't felt in years. Every blueprint, every sketch, every meeting was another brick in the wall between who I'd been and who I was becoming. Sometimes pain doesn't destroy you. It refines you. And slowly, I was learning that revenge didn't always have to come with shouting or chaos. Sometimes it looked like silence. Like standing tall while the person who broke you realizes you're not broken at all. But just when I thought I'd found peace, I got an unexpected phone call that would change everything again. It was from James's firm, asking for a consultation. The man who betrayed me now needed my help. I almost laughed when I heard their offer. Maybe fate was finally giving me a chance to draw my own blueprints. This time, for justice. The phone call lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. James's firm. They needed a consultant. Me. The woman he had discarded like an old coat. I stared at the number on my screen for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keypad. I could say no. I could ignore it entirely, and yet, something in me flickered, a mixture of curiosity and quiet fury. By the time I walked into the gleaming high-rise downtown, the city's skyline stretched behind me like a promise, or a warning. I wore a tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back, eyes sharp and alert. Confidence wasn't something I was faking anymore. It was something I had carved out of betrayal and heartbreak. James didn't greet me at the door. Predictably, he was waiting in the conference room, leaning casually against the table, trying to look effortless. Melissa sat to his right, her expression polite but guarded. "Christina," James said, his voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "I didn't expect you to come so quickly." I met his gaze evenly. I don't come quickly for just anyone, James. You should know that by now. He cleared his throat, glancing at Melissa, who shifted in her chair. Right. Well, we need someone with your expertise for a major project. It's time-sensitive and we thought of you first. I raised an eyebrow, letting the silence stretch. You thought of me first? After everything? Melissa's jaw tightened. She knew better than to speak. James swallowed. We're talking about a corporate redesign, high stakes. Major client, we need your touch, your insight. The way you handle these accounts is unparalleled. I nodded slowly. Flattering. But let's not pretend this isn't awkward. He forced a small smile. I understand. I took a seat across from him, setting my portfolio on the table. I'm listening. But make no mistake, I'm here because I want results. Not because I forgive you. James glanced at Melissa, then back at me. Of course, results. As he outlined the project, detailing client expectations, deadlines, and budget constraints, I listened carefully, taking notes, but my mind was elsewhere. I was cataloging their nervous tics, the way Melissa's fingers tapped anxiously against the table, the way James kept glancing at the clock. They were used to controlling situations, used to manipulating outcomes, but they had no idea I had already calculated my next move. When he mentioned the Henderson account, the very one that had caused so much chaos between us, I felt a quiet thrill. That client had been the tipping point, the reason James and Melissa had gone so far as to try poisoning me. And now they were unknowingly putting it back in my hands. I smiled just a little. So the Henderson account is included in this project? James nodded, trying to maintain his composure. Yes, and we need someone with your skills to manage it directly. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Interesting, because it's also a very delicate situation. One wrong move and everything collapses. Melissa tensed. James swallowed. I paused, letting my words sink in. Lucky for you, I'm very good at managing delicate situations. I stood gathering my portfolio. I'll take the project, but on my terms. I'll need full autonomy. I answer to no one but the client. James opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. No arguments. If you want results, this is the only way it works. He nodded slowly, defeated but trying to mask it. Melissa didn't speak. She knew better. As I walked out of the building, the late afternoon sun glinting off the glass towers, I felt a surge of exhilaration. For the first time since the brunch, since the betrayal, I felt in control. The game had changed, and now it was my turn to play. That night, I reviewed everything I had recorded. Every text, every suspicious meeting, every subtle lie. I cataloged it meticulously, cross-referencing with my schedule, my projects, and even their past dealings. It was more than just revenge. It was proof. If I was going to reclaim what was mine, my clients, my career, my peace of mind, I needed strategy, precision, patience, and most importantly, I needed to make them underestimate me. Because the most dangerous weapon in this game wasn't anger or rage. It was calm, focus, and the knowledge that I had nothing to lose but everything to gain. As I closed my laptop, a notification pinged on my phone. A text from an unknown number. Careful. They're already watching you. I froze, a shiver running down my spine. Someone knew I was planning something. Someone had noticed I wasn't just rebuilding, I was preparing, and that meant I was already in the game. I accepted the project. But they had no idea that every meeting, every presentation, every handshake would be a step in my plan. And this time, I wasn't leaving anything to chance. The next morning, Dallas was already humming with energy as I walked into my temporary office space in James's firm. The sleek glass walls reflected the sun streaming in, but all I could see was my plan unfolding. Every client file, every staff member, every detail. I cataloged it silently, mentally placing each piece in the strategy I'd been refining for weeks. Melissa was there first, hovering near the coffee machine, her polished smile failing to hide the tension in her eyes when she saw me. She tried to act casual, pretending to scroll through her phone. but the way she glanced over her shoulder every few seconds betrayed her. "Good morning." "Christina," she said with a forced cheeriness. "Morning, Melissa," I replied smoothly, letting my voice carry that quiet confidence I had cultivated. "Busy day ahead?" Her eyes flicked nervously to James, who was already on the phone with a client, unaware that I was observing every micro-expression. "You could say that," she said, her tone clipped. I smiled, inwardly savoring the control I felt. They didn't realize it yet, but every small action they took could be predicted. Every lie they whispered, every scheme they plotted, I had already accounted for. I spent the morning reviewing the Henderson account, analyzing every previous interaction, every pitch, every note James and Melissa had left behind. It was obvious they had underestimated me. The level of carelessness in their documentation, the tiny shortcuts, the subtle hints of panic when I first appeared in meetings. It was all there, and I would use it. By midday, I requested a meeting with the internal team handling the Henderson portfolio. When James walked in trying to exude authority, I ignored him, focusing on the numbers, the client feedback, and the upcoming deadlines. I explained my approach in precise terms, highlighting risks, suggesting alternatives, and subtly pointing out where previous missteps had caused inefficiencies. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Realizing I wasn't just competent, I was indispensable. Every suggestion I made not only demonstrated my skill, but also highlighted their prior incompetence. And I didn't stop. After the meeting, I lingered near the coffee machine, deliberately leaving my notes open, a subtle display for anyone watching. James approached, his tone hesitant. "Christina, everything okay?" I looked up, letting a hint of steel cut through my words. "Better than okay, James? I've identified the gaps in the Henderson project and outlined exactly how we'll get the account back on track. You might want to take notes." His jaw tightened. He wasn't used to anyone speaking to him this way. Melissa hovered behind him, and I saw the panic in her eyes. She finally realized the quiet storm she had underestimated. That evening, back at my apartment, I reviewed the recordings and texts one more time. The pattern was clear. They had never expected me to fight back. They thought fear or confusion would keep me compliant. They thought a near-fatal attempt at poisoning would break me. But they had miscalculated. I opened a fresh document on my laptop and began mapping out the next phase. Every meeting I attended, every report I submitted, every client conversation would now serve a dual purpose: deliver exceptional results while also gathering evidence. Evidence of their deception, their greed, their malicious intent. By the time I closed my laptop, Dallas had darkened outside, but my apartment felt bright with resolve. This wasn't just about career redemption anymore. It was about justice. The next day, I arrived at the office with a plan in mind. I would attend the client pitch meeting, but I wouldn't just participate. I would dominate it. I knew the key players, their preferences, their weaknesses. I knew what questions they would ask before they even formulated them. And I knew that when I spoke, I had their attention. Melissa tried to interrupt me during the presentation, her voice trembling slightly, betraying frustration. James glanced at her, then at me, but I maintained my composure, guiding the conversation with ease, demonstrating knowledge, confidence, and authority. The clients leaned in, nodding, taking notes, clearly impressed. Afterward, when the meeting concluded successfully and the clients expressed satisfaction with the proposal, James muttered under his breath, "How is she?" I smiled faintly, letting it hang in the air. "You underestimate me, James. You always have." As I walked back to my office, I realized the first move had been made. The tide had shifted, and from now on, every interaction, every decision, every meeting would be part of a larger strategy. And I wasn't just playing to win professionally. I was playing to ensure they could never hurt me, or anyone else, again. I turned the Henderson account into my weapon. But every step I took was also a step toward exposing James and Melissa. And they still had no idea what was coming next. The morning sun streamed through the office windows, but I felt no warmth, only focus. Every detail mattered, Every glance and conversation could become evidence. I had decided that today the first real trap would be set. My mind replayed the recordings, the texts, the suspicious interactions. Everything pointed to one undeniable truth. James and Melissa weren't just incompetent. They were dangerous. I arrived early, pretending to immerse myself in reports. While covertly observing their routines, James was already at his desk, pretending to type, but I noticed the slight twitch in his fingers whenever he thought no one was looking. Melissa arrived shortly after, carrying her coffee, her perfectly manicured nails tapping nervously against the cup. The tension in the air was almost palpable, but they didn't know I could sense it. I spent the first hour reviewing proposals with a team member, deliberately leaving files open on my laptop for them to see. The Henderson account's latest projections, client feedback, and my notes about previous incidents were all visible. I knew James and Melissa would be tempted to interfere, to manipulate, or to sabotage, thinking they were still in control. And that's exactly what I wanted. By mid-morning, James approached under the pretense of offering guidance. "Christina, I noticed you made some changes to the Henderson proposal," he said, forcing a casual tone that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes," I replied smoothly, keeping my voice calm, almost inviting. "I wanted to optimize our approach for the client presentation tomorrow. Some gaps needed to be addressed." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "I just want to make sure you're not missing anything important. You know how sensitive they are about details." I nodded, smiling faintly. "Of course, James. Attention to detail is exactly why this project is going smoothly." As he walked away, Melissa lingered, pretending to organize her desk. I noticed her glance at my open notes, a flicker of curiosity, or panic, crossing her face. Perfect. The first step of the trap was working. Their instincts to interfere were already being triggered. I had strategically set up my laptop to subtly track every time they accessed the files, every time they hovered too close, every time they tried to manipulate the data. Nothing would escape my notice. Everything they did from this point forward would be recorded. Lunch hour came, and I used it to plant subtle, controlled opportunities for them to overreach. I casually mentioned that I would be consolidating client feedback this afternoon and asked James and Melissa if they wanted to collaborate on refining the presentation. It was framed as teamwork, but the real purpose was to bait them into incriminating themselves. Melissa immediately jumped at the idea, eager to prove control, while James hesitated for a moment, then followed. That hesitation told me he suspected, that I had already anticipated their moves, let them in on the collaboration, but made sure they were funneled into tasks that left digital footprints, tasks that could be traced and used as evidence. Every action, every comment, every edit they made was silently logged. I even subtly monitored their body language and facial expressions, knowing how quickly panic or frustration could betray a guilty conscience. By the time the afternoon rolled around, the trap was fully in motion. Melissa had tried to manipulate the Henderson files, making small changes that would have caused confusion in tomorrow's presentation. James had attempted to intercept an email, unaware that I had already set an auto-forward to my private account. Every move they made was now under my watchful eye. As I walked back to my desk, I allowed myself a small, private smile. They had underestimated me as always. They believed fear and intimidation would keep me compliant. They believed I was unaware. But I wasn't just aware. I was prepared. And I had turned the office into my stage, every meeting and every interaction a calculated step toward exposing them. By tomorrow, not only would I have completed a flawless presentation for the Henderson account, but I would also have undeniable proof of their deception and malicious intent. The day ended with me reviewing the digital logs, confirming that everything was tracking perfectly. I leaned back in my chair, allowing a sense of quiet satisfaction to settle over me. The trap was set. They had taken the bait. They thought they were in control. They didn't see the trap coming. Tomorrow, every lie, every move would be exposed, and they wouldn't have a clue. The morning of the Henderson presentation arrived, and I felt an unusual calm wash over me. My preparations were meticulous. Every slide, every talking point, every potential question had been rehearsed and double-checked. But beneath the calm, there was a simmering excitement. Today wasn't just about impressing a client, it was about exposing James and Melissa, all while proving that their schemes couldn't touch me. As I walked into the conference room, I noticed James and Melissa lurking near the back, pretending to review notes but stealing glances at me. Their attempts to appear casual were laughable. The tension radiating from them was palpable. I held my head high, projecting confidence, because if I faltered for even a second, it could tip them off. But they had already walked into my carefully orchestrated trap. The Henderson team began filtering in, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. I welcomed them warmly, making small talk to set the tone. All the while, I subtly kept James and Melissa in the periphery of my vision, noting every twitch, every nervous glance, every half-hearted smile. They were like sharks circling, unaware that the net had already been cast. When it was time to begin, I took my position at the podium, projecting authority and poise. "Thank you all for being here today," I began, my voice clear and confident. "We've analyzed your previous campaigns, client feedback, and industry benchmarks, and I'm excited to present a strategy that not only meets, but exceeds your expectations." The presentation flowed flawlessly. Every chart, every projection, every recommendation landed exactly as planned. Henderson executives were visibly impressed, nodding and taking notes. I could feel the satisfaction building in me. This wasn't just a triumph of professionalism, but also a personal victory. Meanwhile, I knew James and Melissa were watching my every move, desperate to intervene, desperate to sabotage, but they couldn't. Every potential maneuver they attempted was already anticipated and countered. Melissa tried to subtly point something out in a spreadsheet, hoping to undermine my authority, but I had prepared alternate data sets that made her interference obvious. The executives noticed immediately, exchanging curious glances that betrayed their confusion about her intervention. James, on the other hand, attempted to send a last-minute email to the client, a desperate move to discredit me. But the auto-forward system I had set up earlier ensured that I received a copy of the email instantly. I made a discreet note to include it as evidence later. Their panic was almost palpable, even from across the room. By the end of the presentation, the Henderson team was fully convinced. They asked questions, engaged in discussion, and expressed clear enthusiasm about moving forward with our proposals. My heart swelled, not just because of the professional success, but because the trap I had set for James and Melissa was working perfectly. Every action they had taken today would now be traceable, documented, and undeniable. As the meeting concluded, I remained standing confidently while James and Melissa tried to salvage whatever dignity they could. "Thank you for your time," I said to the clients, my tone warm but firm. "We look forward to executing this strategy and achieving measurable results together." Once the Henderson team left, I turned to face James and Melissa, who now looked genuinely unsettled. "Did you enjoy the show?" I asked quietly, letting the words hang in the air. Melissa opened her mouth to reply, but no words came. James's face went pale, and for the first time in months, I saw fear replace his arrogance. I had won today, and the evidence was flawless. Every email, every attempted interference, every nervous glance had been recorded and stored. This wasn't just about the Henderson account anymore. It was about exposing months of deception and malicious intent. I walked past them, my steps measured, my heart steady. "Don't worry," I said over my shoulder, my voice calm, almost teasing. "Everything is being documented, and it's all going straight to the authorities." They thought they could control the narrative. They had no idea their every move was recorded. Tomorrow, their carefully hidden scheme would unravel completely, and justice would be undeniable. By the time I returned to my office that afternoon, the weight of the morning's victory was tempered by a sharper sense of purpose. James and Melissa were already waiting, or rather pacing nervously, their carefully crafted facade now stripped away. I could see it in their eyes: panic, frustration, and disbelief. For months, they had believed themselves untouchable, orchestrating their subtle sabotage without consequence. Today, that illusion had shattered. I closed the office door behind me and let the silence linger, forcing them to confront it. "You really thought this would go unnoticed," I said, my voice calm but cutting, measured with precision. James opened his mouth, likely to stammer out a half-hearted denial, but Melissa cut him off first. "Christina, it's not what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling. Her usual icy confidence had evaporated entirely. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the desk between us. The screen displayed the video recording from the brunch, the evidence of the coffee switch, the tremors, James's whispered panic, and Melissa's own fearful reaction. "Everything," I said, letting my words linger like a blade. "Every attempt, every text, every sick excuse you've manufactured over the past 6 months. It's all here." Melissa's eyes darted to James, who had slumped into a chair, his hands covering his face. We were just trying to help," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "You were working too hard." "We didn't mean to." "Don't," I interrupted sharply. "You meant to make me sick. You meant to ruin my career. You meant to control me, to manipulate every meeting, every client, every opportunity. And now it's all documented." I leaned closer, my eyes locked on theirs. "Do you understand the gravity of what you've done?" Melissa swallowed hard, her fingers fidgeting nervously. I didn't think it would go this far," she whispered. "We just wanted to level the playing field." "Level the playing field?" I repeated, incredulous. "By poisoning me?" My hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline coursing through me. "You turned your so-called help into an attempt on my life. And you did it repeatedly. Do you have any idea how close this came to being fatal?" James slumped lower in his chair, muttering, "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Just one more attempt." I shook my head. One more attempt would have been enough. But now it's over. I've recorded everything, documented everything, and informed the authorities. Your game is done. Every meeting, every email, every manipulation. It's all accounted for. Justice will follow, and this time, there will be no excuses. Melissa's face had gone pale, and I could see tears threatening to fall. For the first time, her control had evaporated completely. James's hands were still covering his face, but I knew the guilt and fear were consuming him internally. I grabbed the file I had prepared for Detective Mendoza. Every recording, every email, every suspicious message neatly organized and ready to submit. "This goes straight to law enforcement," I said firmly. "Everything you've done, from minor manipulations to deliberate attempts on my health, is now evidence. You'll be held accountable for every action." The room was thick with tension, silence punctuated only by Melissa's shaky breathing and James's soft, defeated groans. I let the moment hang, savoring the shift in power, from the manipulators to the victim who refused to be broken. Finally, I stepped back and spoke with quiet authority. "You may have thought you could control me, but you underestimated my instincts, my preparation, and my resolve. This ends now, and it ends with the truth coming to light. Your carefully hidden conspiracy is over, and believe me, the consequences will be severe." They didn't respond, their silence louder than any argument. I picked up my phone, ensuring that my recordings were backed up to multiple secure locations, and made one last note in my journal, a detailed account of today's confrontation. Every second, every word, every reaction had been captured. I knew the next steps were in law enforcement's hands, but I felt a sense of satisfaction I hadn't known for months. The months of manipulation, fear, and uncertainty were finally met with clarity, exposure, and accountability. Today, I reclaimed control. Today, I won. James and Melissa thought their secrets were safe. They didn't know that every move had been tracked. The moment the authorities see this evidence, everything they built to destroy me will collapse. Completely. The following weeks unfolded like a slow-burning storm, quiet on the surface, but charged with tension beneath. I had handed every piece of evidence to Detective Mendoza. The recordings, the emails, the digital logs, even the security footage from that morning in the break room. When I left his office, a sense of finality settled over me. There was nothing more to hide, no more second-guessing. The truth was finally out there, and it was unstoppable. The investigation moved quickly. Within days, James and Melissa were both placed on administrative leave while the company's internal review began. HR called me in several times to clarify certain details, though it was clear they were trying to assess how deeply this scandal could damage the firm's reputation. For once, I didn't feel intimidated sitting across from them. I told the truth calmly and confidently, without emotion clouding my words. By the third week, the police had confirmed traces of the same chemical compound found in the coffee samples from our break room, matching the one detected in my blood work months earlier. That confirmation was the final piece. When I received the call from Detective Mendoza saying, "We have everything we need. They'll be charged within 48 hours," I just sat in silence for a moment. Not relief exactly, something deeper. A peace that comes only after surviving chaos. The day they were arrested, I was in my office reviewing reports when two uniformed officers escorted James and Melissa out of the building. No shouting, no theatrics, just quiet humiliation. Employees gathered, whispering, staring, piecing together fragments of gossip. James refused to meet my eyes, but Melissa did. Her expression was a mix of fear and regret. For a second, I almost pitied her. Almost. After that day, everything began to change. The company released a statement acknowledging serious misconduct within upper management and formally cleared me of all wrongdoing. Henderson renewed their contract and even requested that I personally oversee their upcoming campaign. I was promoted to senior strategy director within a month, but beyond the career wins, it was the personal restoration that mattered most. I started sleeping again. The headaches were gone. I could look in the mirror without seeing exhaustion or doubt staring back. For months I had lived like a ghost, constantly watching my back, questioning my own instincts. Now I was grounded again, fully present, fully aware, and fully free. One evening, I found myself sitting on the balcony of my Dallas apartment, watching the city lights shimmer across the skyline. The air was cool, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet gratitude. Not for what I'd been through, but for who I'd become because of it. I wasn't the same woman who once tolerated manipulation and deceit for the sake of peace. I had learned that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the strength to confront it. The trial took place 3 months later. I sat in the courtroom as the prosecution laid out the evidence, the recordings, the emails, the chemical reports. Watching James and Melissa squirm on the stand was a strange experience. I didn't feel anger anymore, just closure. They were sentenced to serve time for attempted poisoning and workplace harassment. Their careers, their reputations, everything they had built on lies, gone in a moment. After the sentencing, Detective Mendoza approached me with a small, respectful nod. "You did the right thing," he said. "You could have stayed quiet, but you didn't. That's courage most people never find." I smiled softly, meeting his gaze. "Courage doesn't always roar," I said quietly. "Sometimes it just whispers. Not this time." That night, I walked out of the courthouse and felt the weight lift completely. I had faced my fears, exposed the truth, and survived the betrayal that once threatened to destroy me. My story had come full circle, and as I stood under the Texas sky, the city lights glowing like embers below, I whispered to myself, "They tried to erase me. Instead, they made me unforgettable. They took my peace, my trust, my name, and I took it all back." Justice wasn't just served. It was earned. Because in the end, truth always wins, and I made sure it had my name on it.